I'm sure you're aware that spring is getting closer and closer. We're now into March, and we're going to get to that point where we're going to start and sow lots and lots of seeds. But be very careful when you do your seeds in March. Just because spring is virtually upon us doesn't mean that that weather won't drop right down again. And we did mention a couple of days ago that for the next coming week the temperature is going to go down to -1. Well, that's changed again. Now apparently it's going to drop down to -3 with a chance of sleet. So plummeting temperatures like that aren't going to do your plants outside much good. So if not already fleeced, get some fleece over them in preparation for that coming. And do the same in your greenhouses, because we haven't reached that point quite yet where you couldn't lose a lot of your plants due to hard frosts. I've known that happen in mid-April. But to stay on the positive side of things, there are quite a lot of things to do in March, and there's also a lot of seeds that you can sow. But majority of those are going to have to still be indoors. We've been growing lots of things indoors that at the moment you still can't do outside. We've got these little tiny tomato plants. Couple of cheap lights indoors, and they're up and on the way. And they're called cherry falls. So they're a cherry tomato dwarf variety or bush tomato. But these aren't staying in this greenhouse. These are going back indoors because they won't survive out here. And I've also been growing some peppers indoors as well. And we've got quite a lot of those come up. And these are the sweet peppers that grow quite long as 5 inches in length. And we've also got another tray which are California Wonder, which are your big sweet bell peppers. And then of course, just after Christmas, we were sowing some other peppers as well, which are now getting to be an half decent size. But even though they're at that size, they still can't stay out here. They won't tolerate any degree of cold whatsoever. You've still got to stick to your cold hardy stuff, like your cauliflowers, your cabbages, carrots, onions, broad beans, things like that. But what we'll do is we'll go through a list of things that you can start and do from the first week in March right up until the 4th week in March, and we'll start and do that every month, week by week, so you can set yourself a little planner as you go through each month. Obviously when you reach that point where the weather is really nice and hot, and then it's up to you what you sow and grow. But for now we're going to take it in stages. So one thing that we never really tend to cover, although we do them ourselves, are trees. And the first week in March is a good time to either plant new trees, which are for sale at the moment in local supermarkets, and they are quite cheap, but they do grow. We've bought them in past, and you've seen the pear tree that we had last year, and that's a dwarf patio one. But if you're thinking about growing any fruit trees, you can in March buy the trees and get them planted in ground. If you do get some really bad frosts coming, I would still put a bit of protection over the top of those trees just until it's passed, but you can get some of those planted. And also, if you've already got trees like apples and pears in your garden, early March is a good time to just give them a quick prune before they get that fresh boost of growth from mid-spring. And if you've not already started doing it, chit your potatoes ready to go in April, because your potato seeds are going to take 4 to 5 weeks to develop good enough chits to be put outside. And we do that so once we've put them either in the ground or in containers, they've already got an head start in growth. So if you've not started it already, start chitting your potatoes. And the best way to do that is to pop them in little trays like this, or old egg boxes if you've got some. And what you want to do is leave them somewhere that's light, so they start growing these chits. Don't put them in sunlight, they don't need that. And it's not too cold. We're perfectly fine to chit your potatoes. So if you've not already started those, get those started now. Those were second earlies that I'm getting ready for planting out in a few weeks' time. We've got some broad beans growing. They've been growing all the way through the autumn and winter months. And you can see we've got some decent flowers coming on them. We've also got a few leaves at the bottom that don't look so clever, which we don't mind just taking off. We won't need those anymore. And you can see that the plant now is starting to split off and produce extra stems, which will then in turn produce more flowers, which then become more beans. So these are well on the way to growing, and we've got a few pots of these, and they're a dwarf variety that we're growing as well. This one being the biggest one at the moment that we've got. And again, lots of flowers on it. And it's a good size. But if you haven't started any broad beans at the moment, first week of March is a very good time to start some from seed. Just sow some in some pots like that. And you can take them inside to germinate as well. That'll just speed up that process. But providing it's not -3, they would still germinate outside in your greenhouse. So if you've not done any broad beans, start them off in pots ready to plant out in spring. Also, we did mention those peppers that I've just shown you. And if you've not already started sowing any seeds for your pepper plants this year or your chilies, it's not too late to do that. You can do them now, but obviously you're going to have to get those done indoors. Keep them at about 70 to 8 degrees in temperature, and they should germinate within a couple of weeks. If you want to speed that process up, soak the seeds in a wheat tea solution overnight first. That'll just soften that shell a little bit, and then they could germinate in as little as a week. We've done videos on that in past, and it definitely does work. But because peppers and chilies need a long growing season, if you didn't sow any in January, like we did, then definitely sow some now. Bring them on indoors. And obviously don't forget that when it comes to the time to bring them out, you've got to harden those plants off, which means bringing them out for an hour a day over a week, just to allow them to get used to the temperature changes outside and the sunlight as well, because it's completely different to grow lights. And obviously once you've got to that stage where you can bring your peppers outside, they're going to grow 10 times as quick as they do indoors when you're trying to bring them on through winter, which is one advantage of sowing them a little bit later. But if you've not already done them, you need to do them now. We've also been sowing peas, and not a lot's happened at the moment, but we have got one there that is just trying to break the surface and come through. Peas are quite fast to germinate, so you can sow them at different times through the year to get staggered harvests. But if you want to get an early harvest, sow some peas now, and that's your mangetout and your regular peas as well. Just do a few like we've done, and then once we get to spring, we'll sow a load more. But if you've not started any peas and you're thinking about doing it, you definitely can do them to either get an early harvest of peas or pea shoots. And so far that's pretty much all we're doing in week 1 of March, plus everything else that we've been doing since late last year. Normally on week 2 of March it's time to start sowing celery, but once again you need to sow those seeds and grow them indoors. It's going to be still way too cold to have them outside in your greenhouses to get any decent amount of germination. If you've been growing leeks in pots, which a lot of people do, as we do with onions, we sow onions indoors very early in the year, just to grow them on and get them started. And we put them in these little cells, and then we'll take them outside and we'll multi-sow them. But if you don't want to multi-sow them, you just want one onion or one leek to grow as a single plant, then second week of March is a good idea to get your pots and start separating these leeks off or thinning them out before they get too dense with that root system. But you can multi-sow leeks if you want to. I've done it in the past, and I've grown 4 or 5 leeks in a bunch together. So that choice is yours. But if you do want to grow single leek plants, start thinning them out now. And also, if you're planning on growing any squash or pumpkins later in the year, whatever ground you're going to be using for that, make sure that's prepared. Make sure it's nicely dug over, or you've added fresh compost just to amend it from last year, because as we know, things like squash, they take lots of nutrition out of soil. They're very heavy nitrogen feeders for a start. So if you've got an idea of where you want to put your squash this year, then make sure that that ground has been prepared in advance of you putting your little plants in, which we'll be doing a little bit later. It's a little bit too early to start things like that at the moment, but it's never too early to prepare your ground. At the start of week 3 in March, if you grow asparagus, then you can start sowing seeds for that as well. We don't grow asparagus, but if you do, week 3 of March is a good time to start sowing seeds and getting those plants brought on. But again, those seeds will need to be sown indoors. We'll be growing some early varieties of Brussels this year as well, and they're called early half tall, so they don't get quite as big as a regular Brussels plant, because we get quite bad winds around here, so the taller the plants, the more susceptible they are to damage. So we've picked that variety because it's half the height, but you still get lots and lots of Brussels of it. And it's an early variety of Brussels. So if you want some of those, the seeds for those plants also need sowing in March, around about week 3. And obviously again, you sow them indoors to get them germinating quicker, so you can bring the plants on. And you can still bring them in and out when we get nice sunny days, because at the same time as doing that, you'll be hardening your plants off as well, plus giving them proper sunlight, which will help the plants grow much quicker. So if you've not started any Brussels, now's the time to think about doing that. And the same things go for your cabbages. We've got little cabbages growing in pots like this that we've been bringing on. We've also got some broccoli plants which are ready now to be going outside, but because we've got that threat of a -3 temperature next week, we can't put them outside just yet, which is the reason we move them into little pots, just so we can keep them going for that little bit longer before we plant them out, so we don't run the risk of losing as plants. And we've done the same thing with Savoy cabbages. These are a good size and they'll soon be ready for going out. Not quite yet, but we are getting there. So if you want some early varieties of cabbage, cauliflowers, Brussels and broccolis, sow some seeds now, get those plants growing. You can just grow them in those little multi-cells to start them off, or you can grow them in little tubs and then prick the seedlings out and plant them on. Entirely up to you how you do it. But if you want early cabbages, things like Greyhound are a really good one, and so is Durham. So they're your fastest growing cabbages that you can get. And then if you want cauliflowers, you can get things like All Year Round, which is quite a good one as well. And then obviously whatever type of broccoli you want, whether it be green sprouting or purple. But if it's something you're planning on doing, think about doing that week 3 of March. And do the same thing with the onions as well. If you want onions all through year, especially spring onions, keep sowing yourselves fresh batches of spring onions, because they're very cold hardy, and once they get established they can grow quite quick. We're not quite ready for putting onion sets out yet, because the frost is really going to damage those small bulbs. So if you've got onion sets to put out that you'd normally put out in March, which I've done before, I would hold off that just for a little while longer. It's not going to hurt the bulbs. They've already spent a year in storage, so a few more weeks is not going to make the difference. But if they get hit by bad frosts, that could make all the difference to your later harvest. So grow some onions in packs, like these ones that we're doing. And they're red onions. And we're going to thin these out and try and plant them out as either multi-sown or single. We've got a couple of packs of those on go, and we've not made up our mind exactly what we want to do with them just yet. So you can sow yourself some onions, and you could plant yourself some garlic as well, because both of those need really long growing seasons. So that's another thing for you to think about. When you get to week 3, we should have passed pretty much most of the harshest weather, so you can then start and plant things like broad beans and peas directly outside, without having to bring them on in little pots in your greenhouse. But if you're going to do that, make sure you cover them up with something, or the mice will dig them up and eat them all. So if you'd rather not grow indoors, or you haven't got a greenhouse, then you can start and put peas and broad beans outside. But not French beans. French beans are not cold hardy at all. So just wait before you plant any French beans, because you're better off bringing those on in containers in a greenhouse and then planting those out late April when it's a bit warmer, because a frost will kill those plants straight away. If you've got rhubarb growing in your garden like we have, it should be starting to grow. But because we've had such an harsh December and a very up and down beginning to year, it's probably not growing as much as it normally would, because usually by the 3rd to 4th week of March you should be able to start harvesting some small stems. At the moment we haven't got any on ours. We've got the startings of leaves and small stems, but nothing worth taking. But if you live in a warmer part of the UK, then maybe you've got rhubarb in your garden that's now ready to harvest a few sticks off, because you're supposed to harvest rhubarb quite early, because then it's not so tough. So maybe it's worth popping out and having a look at that over the next couple of weeks. And of course, we mentioned the tomatoes that we've got growing indoors. If you've not already started any tomatoes, then 3rd week of March is a good time to start sowing tomatoes indoors, because we are going to get much better light levels so they can go on a windowsill, and it should start to get that little bit warmer as well. And we're not going to be too far away at that stage to be able to put them outside in as greenhouses, by which time your tomato plants are going to be quite a big size but not overly big, which is what we've been trying to avoid over the last few months, not sowing them too early. And exactly the same goes for things like your cucumbers and melons, all those tender crops that we do. So you can start sowing those indoors now and bringing them on, knowing that because you've waited those few weeks, you're not going to end up with oversized plants before it's warm enough to actually put them outside in your greenhouses. And obviously don't forget, apart from all those things, we still need to be sowing things like as lettuce and as spinach, because again they're cold hardy, and that's something you can grow pretty much all year round. So if you've been doing sowings of lettuce and spinach and various other salad leaves, then maybe do a new batch of those, so again you can stagger those harvests over the next few months. So all the things that I mentioned late on in this video, week 3 to week 4, which will be outdoor sowings of peas and beans and even carrots, because you can direct sow carrots outside as well. But just bear in mind that it won't hurt to just pop a bit of fleece over top of those to protect them from these temperatures. And also, everything that I've mentioned I will paste into the description of this video, so you can scroll through it at a later date. Or you could watch this video again, which I don't mind either. But just bear in mind that they're all based around my own situation in the area of England that I'm in, which is Derbyshire. And my last frost date is the 2nd week of May. So you might need to adjust that a little to suit you in the area that you're in, or the country that you're in. Between now and the end of March, you've already got quite an extensive list of things that you can be doing or starting to grow, and as well potting things on that you've already started to grow over the last few weeks, so that when spring does it and we start and get some actual decent temperatures, we're going to be ready with lots and lots of fresh seedlings ready to go. And I hope this video has proved really useful, especially to new people that are just starting out with this year. And we were covering lots of other things to try and help make everything as successful as possible as we head into spring. But for now, things like your little tomato plants and your delicate peppers, we'll be taking those back inside and waiting till it's time to bring everything outdoors. And although March does seem to be quite a busy month, get ready for April update, because April is probably one of your busiest months a year, and the list of things to do then is probably going to be twice as big. And if you want to see what that is, please hit that subscribe button and press that notifications bell, and we look forward to seeing you then. Take care.